The subway car rattled and groaned as it sped through the underground tunnels of Boston's Red Line. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a pale glow on the mostly empty train. It was nearly midnight, and the usual weekday rush had long since vanished. In car 1287, just a handful of passengers remained. Scattered in their own corners of exhaustion, Emily Sanders let out a slow breath as she collapsed into a plastic seat. Her limbs heavy with fatigue. She'd just finished a brutal 14-hour shift at Massachusetts General Hospital. 2 patients had coded. One elderly woman had passed away in her final hour, and her replacement nurse had been 40 minutes late. Her back ached, her feet throbbed. Inside her white sneakers, and her mind was a blur of monitors, IV drips, and quick decisions. She wore navy blue scrubs and a hospital badge that still dangled from her chest. Reading Emily Sanders' Arnex Sue, she rubbed her eyes and leaned her head against the cool window. Her backpack clutched to her chest like a pillow. She'd gotten on at Charles MGH station and was planning to get off at Harvard only, a few stops away. But as the train rocked steadily along the tracks, her eyelids grew heavier. Across the aisle, Marcus Hill, 34, noticed her as she sat down. He had earbuds in and a laptop case resting by his feet, having just left a friend's birthday dinner in Cambridge. His gray hoodie and jeans gave no hint of the tech startup he worked for, and he was half watching a video on his phone about the pile of emails waiting for him tomorrow. At first, he only glanced at the young woman slumped in the seat across from him. Nurses were common on this line, especially this late. But there was something about her maybe. It was how tightly she hugged her backpack, or the way her breathing slowed into a deep, exhausted rhythm that made him look again. She was completely out. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, trying not to stare. It wasn't any of his business. People fell asleep on trains all the time. Still, a little voice in his head stirred. What if she missed her stop? What if someone tried to mess with her while she was out? This late at night, not everyone riding the train had good intentions. At the far end of the car, 2 teenagers blasted music through a speaker. An older man in a worn Red Sox cap muttered to himself, his words slurred. A middle-aged woman near the door seemed half asleep herself. No one paid attention to anyone else. No one noticed the nurse sleeping soundly, heading farther and farther away from where she meant to go. The train screeched into Kendall MIT station. The doors opened. People came and went. Emily didn't move. Marcus leaned back and frowned quietly, wondering, how far will she go before someone notices? He didn't know it yet, but soon he would be that someone. Harvard Station came and went. The train doors slid open with their usual ding, letting in a gust of warm summer air from the platform. A few passengers stepped off, and a couple wandered on. The overhead announcement crackled. Harvard Station, doors closing. Emily didn't budge. Her head had fallen slightly to one side now, her cheek pressed against the glass window. A strand of chestnut brown hair clung to her forehead. Damp with sweat from the long day, she looked peaceful. Vulnerable, even. Marcus looked up from his phone just as the train pulled out of the station. His stomach tensed a little. Wait, that was Harvard, wasn't it? He glanced across the aisle again. She was still asleep, completely out, not even a stir. He shifted in his seat, his instincts prickling. He didn't know her, had no reason to interfere, but the city at night could be unpredictable. And the train's final stop, Ellwife, wasn't exactly the safest place to end up alone. After midnight, Marcus turned his head and looked around. No one else had noticed. The 2 teens at the far end were now arguing about which rapper was overrated. The mumbling old man had curled into himself in the corner. A couple holding hands looked half-dash asleep. He looked back at Emily. Do I say something? Will she freak out if a random guy talks to her while she's asleep? But what if I don't, and she ends up stranded, or worse? The next stop approached Porter Square. He hesitated. He leaned forward a bit and said softly, Hey, ... excuse me. No response. The train slowed. He cleared his throat and tried again. A little louder this time. Miss, I think you missed your stop. Nothing. She didn't even twitch. The doors opened. Marcus had a split second to make a decision: get off and let it go, or stay and make sure she was okay. He stayed. As the train pulled away from the station again, Marcus stood and moved one seat closer, careful to keep a respectful distance. Hey, he said gently, not touching her. Emily, right? You're a nurse." Still no response. He wasn't about to shake her awake, but his concern was growing. He noticed her backpack had an embroidered keychain on the zipper. Nurses heal hearts, and the corner of a half-eaten protein bar stuck out of the side pocket. She had clearly been through a long day. He took out his phone and opened a map of the Red Line. Only one stop left. After that, the train would shut down for the night. Marcus sighed and glanced back at her. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone. If no one else is going to do it, he made a quiet promise right then. He wouldn't let her end up alone at the end of the line. Not tonight. The train slowed as it approached Alewife. The final stop on the Red Line, the platform was quiet, dimly lit, and almost deserted at this hour. A lone janitor stood in the distance, mopping, slowly near a vending machine. The air outside was thick with the scent of late-night rain on hot pavement as the doors slid open with a low hiss. Marcus stood up and walked over to the still-sleeping nurse. He crouched slightly. The platform was nearly silent as Emily and Marcus walked side by side under flickering overhead lights. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the tiled walls, mixing with the distant hum of a vending machine and the occasional buzz of a tired fluorescent bulb. Emily adjusted the strap of her backpack and looked over at him. "So, did you really stay all the way to the last stop just to make sure I was okay?" Marcus smiled, hands in his hoodie pockets. "Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was the right move or if I'd just scare you when you woke up." She laughed softly. "You didn't scare me? You kind of saved me from a very expensive Uber ride, probably a panic attack? I'll take that as a win." They reached the opposite platform. The digital sign overhead blinked, inbound to Ashmont. Braintree, 5 minutes. They sat on a nearby bench. Emily stretched her legs out in front of her and sighed. "Man, I've never been that tired. I was out like a rock." Marcus tilted his head. "I see you, nurse, right? That sounds intense." "It is," she nodded. "I love it, but some days it takes everything out of you." Today was one of those days. He nodded thoughtfully. "I work in tech. My worst day usually just means a server crash or someone pushing bad code." "Honestly, that sounds like heaven," she said with a weak grin. Marcus chuckled. "I doubt anyone has ever called debugging at 2 a.m. heaven, but I appreciate the flattery." There was a pause. Not an awkward one, but the kind that feels safe like silence between old friends. Emily glanced at him sideways. "You always ride the Red Line this late." "Not really," he replied. "Was at a friend's birthday thing in Cambridge. Had won too many slices of cake and decided to take the train instead of driving." She grinned, responsible and kind. "Your mom raised you right." Marcus shrugged modestly. "She tried." The sound of the approaching train echoed in the tunnel. As the lights appeared in the distance, Emily turned slightly toward him. "Seriously, Marcus, thank you. You didn't have to do what you did. Most people wouldn't even notice, let alone stay behind." He met her eyes, warm and steady. "Honestly, I just didn't like the idea of you waking up alone at the end of the line. That's not how someone should end a long day." The train arrived, its brakes hissing as it slowed to a stop. The doors opened and they stepped on together. Choosing a pair of seats side by side this time, as the train pulled away, Marcus said lightly, "So, about that coffee." Emily smiled. "You'll have to earn it by staying awake next time." "I can manage that," he said with a grin, and as the city blurred past the windows, two strangers who might have stayed strangers began to feel just a little bit less like ones. The train rumbled back toward the heart of the city, the once empty car now filling slowly with a handful of late-night passenger students, shift workers, a man with paint-splattered boots, and a woman with a sleeping toddler on her shoulder. But Emily and Marcus barely noticed. They were caught in the strange comfort of this unexpected moment. Emily leaned back in her seat, watching the tunnel lights flash past the windows. "I've lived in Boston for almost 4 years," she said, "and nothing like this has ever happened to me." "What?" Marcus asked, falling asleep on the train. She smirked. "No, a complete stranger waiting an extra half hour just to make sure I got home safe." He gave a soft laugh. "To be fair, it's not something I do every day either. But tonight, it just felt like the right thing to do." She looked at him. Again really looked. His face was calm, open, the kind of face you instinctively trusted. Maybe it was the honesty in his voice, or the fact that he hadn't once made her feel uncomfortable even while she was most vulnerable. When they finally pulled into Harvard Station, Emily stood up and slung her backpack over one shoulder. "This is me," she said. Marcus stood with her. "I'll walk you up. It's late. You still playing the Good Samaritan, huh?" He smiled. "More like finishing what I started." They walked up the stairs in silence, stepping into the night air. The city was quieter now, just a few passing cars and the soft rustle of wind through the trees lining the square. A street lamp buzzed overhead as they reached the top. Emily stopped just outside the station entrance. "This is me," she said again, gesturing toward the quiet street where her apartment stood a few blocks away. "I'll be fine from here." Marcus nodded, but didn't walk away just yet. "I'm really glad I stayed on that train," he said simply. She looked at him, her voice softer now. "So am I." There was a pause, not the kind that asked for words, but the kind that invited a choice. Emily reached into her bag, pulled out a small notepad she used at work, and scribbled something down. She tore the page and handed it to him. "My number," she said, "in case you ever want that coffee. Or if your dog needs medical attention." He raised an eyebrow. "You remember Cooper?" "I remember everything when I'm fully awake," she replied with a tired grin. He laughed, taking the paper and slipping it carefully into his pocket, like it was something fragile. "Well then," he said, backing away slowly, "get some sleep, Nurse Emily." She smiled. "Good night, Marcus." And with that, she turned and walked toward her building,